Well, thank you all for coming to the dedication of this wonderful room, the Linda W. Beazley Community Room, named in honor of one of the most outstanding individuals I've ever known. She was smart, competitive, and fiery, feisty, intuitive, and I'm just going to say lovely inside and out. And I think all of us here who knew her so well would agree with all of that. I'm Lynn Bailey, and I'm the elections director here in Richmond County. And I had the pleasure of working for Linda for 15 years. She hired me when I was a young teenager, fresh out of high school, and I could not have asked for a better mentor or friend over the years. She was absolutely mesmerizing to me as an 18-year-old coming into the Board of Elections office, and I thought she must surely be the smartest and most beautiful person I'd ever seen. She was a great role model for me over the years and a great teacher. And I know that I'm biased, and she certainly wasn't perfect, but she no doubt had a special talent and an appreciation for life. I sometimes describe her best as having good old-fashioned gumption. She had tremendous insight and could get things done better than anybody I've ever known. I was talking to Susan Rice one day, good long-time friend, and Linda did some volunteer work with Susan over the years that required the county, the city, or the county to play a part in providing dumpsters and different things for these events. And Susan, I think, summed it up very well when she said there just wasn't anything that Linda couldn't get done. She paved the road and made things easy, and I think she did that for a lot of us. So for today's dedication, this room that we're in today has been a long time coming. We started renovations for the municipal building in 2010, and it took probably 2 years to figure out where exactly the Board of Elections was going to be located. We knew that we needed to be somewhere convenient for voters to vote, but we also needed to have an office space from which to do our work. So we bounced around all over the place, from the offices over on the right on Green Street, where it used to house a local law firm that now holds the city's law department. We looked at that space and decided that wasn't going to work for us. And then we looked over on Broad Street at the infamous Chamber of Commerce building in the middle of the street. Thought about that for about 30 seconds and decided that wasn't going to work, not for us. Then we looked at some space on the 3rd floor here, and on the 4th floor, and on the 9th floor. And finally, we settled upon some great space on the 5th floor, but with a little caveat. And that would be that we, the Board of Elections, would have first dibs at this space during advance voting. So that's where we are today and how we've come to be here. And just as we had hoped, this room, it doesn't take but one time in the room and in the space to realize that this is truly a community room. And what we see now, again, just as we had hoped, is departments from all over this building using this space for training, for public meetings, public hearings, and whatnot. So we're thrilled that it's being used in the way that we hoped it would be. So we're going to get on with the program. We have several speakers today, and our speakers include the first chairperson of the Board of Elections, Mr. Pat Rice. He's a practicing attorney here in Augusta, and then we also have President of Young Harris College, Kathy Cox, also former Secretary of State Kathy Cox is here with us today. Both of those individuals worked with Linda throughout her career, and I think will give us some little insight of their experience with Linda. On behalf of the city, we have Mayor Hardy Davis, and on behalf of the family, we have Linda's son, Wayne, who will talk to us as well. And we're also very pleased to have with us today current Secretary of State Brian Kemp, who will join me at the end of the program in some closing remarks. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Pat Rice. Pat served, as I said, as the first ever chairperson of the newly created Board of Elections from 1973 to 1980. He and his wife, Susan, became good friends of Linda's over the years. Pat's a highly regarded attorney in Augusta and a partner with the distinguished Hull Barrett law firm. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Pat Rice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. When I was first contacted by Lynn to come say a few words, I was so flattered. I started immediately trying to figure out what to say about my good friend Linda. And I've got a few thousand words here that I want to share with you about. But as we talked about it, I said, well, Linda, how long would you like for me to speak? And she said, oh, no, you take how much time you need. She said, I think maybe as much as 3 to 5 minutes. And, you know, I kind of hurt my feelings. As a lawyer, you know, you can't hardly introduce yourself and let everybody know how great you are in 5 minutes. You know, there's a lot more to cover than that. But certainly with Linda, please forgive me because I don't think 5 minutes is going to quite work, but it'll be close. I'll try to make it close. Looks like I've lost my notes, so it'll be real close. There are several approaches that I wanted to take today. One of them is very serious, and one of them is a little more lighthearted. The first one is about who Linda really was. I think we all knew Linda, the public figure that was always so helpful and friendly and laughing and taking care of our needs. But the real Linda probably knew more people in Richmond County than any of us have ever even run into in our lifetime. My experience with her was primarily as a friend, very secondary as an employee, I guess, of the elections board back when we started in 1970. But maybe not all of y'all remember that she was one heck of a high school basketball player. And I played a little basketball about the same time, and that was the only girls team I really ever wanted to go watch play. I just wanted to go see Linda play, and we'd sit there and nudge each other and say, thank God she's not playing on the boys team. She was also my helper, and probably more important than all of those things, she was an inspiration to me. In the year 1970, we here in Richmond County decided to take advantage of some new state legislation which allowed us to change the voting and registration set up here in Richmond County. And the registration process, some of you old gray-headed fellows will remember, was Doug Bernard's mother in the far end of the old building. And she was the registrar, and then we had Judge Pope, for whom Linda had worked for a while, who really ran the elections part of the deal. And so we put that together, and the idea was that the Democratic Party would appoint 2 members to the board of elections. The Republican Party would appoint 2 people to the board, and then the board would select the chairman. And I guess I must have been the youngest and dumbest guy in town, and I agreed to serve, having no idea what I was really getting into. Augusta, at that point in time, was, I think, like the entire nation, going through a metamorphosis politically. There was a lot going on in the country. The school immigration was going on, not only across the country, but here. We had an old line political party which had gradually gone out of power, but still had some vestiges, the old cracker party, and the machine bosses, the election bosses that went along with that. We had the black community who had finally broken loose from these bosses and were now voting independently. And so there was just a lot going on. And we'd even had an annexation referendum by that point in time. And it had, I think, 2 of them by 1970, and they'd both been defeated. And I think we had 1 more before we ultimately got to something called consolidation. At any rate, our board of elections under Linda really became, Kathy Cox, I don't know if you will remember this, you're too young, but I think our board here in Augusta really kind of became a model for how to conduct one across the state. And I went into the job with a lot of fear and trepidation, but we wound up being the most congenial board you could ever imagine. We really never had a knockdown, drag-out fighter. And there was a secret to that we were unaware of when we took the job. The secret was that the county commission had suggested to us that we hire our good friend Linda, and we did. Most of us knew Linda by then because she'd been working for Judge Pope. But Linda had this special gift with people, as all of you here today know. And once Linda explained to you how things ought to be, well, that's how things got to be. And she did it in a gentle, sweet manner. She was a better person than most of us, and certainly better than I was. I want to get real serious for just a minute. I've been trying to think, what can I say that's not obvious about it? And my wife and I went to church on Sunday morning, and the homilist started talking about giving of yourself, and talked about how we, all of us here in this room, are really God's eyes, God's hands, His legs, and His heart. And that's how God reaches people in this world, through other people. And He probably reaches us in some other ways, but that's the primary way. So the first point I want to make is that is who Linda Beazley really was. She was a giver of self. She wasn't just a friend. She was a sharer. She was a helper. She was a teacher. And if I might, in the broadest sense of the word, she was a lover. She loved people. She loved her fellow man. Rarely did I ever drop in to see her in her office when there was not somebody in her office talking to her. And more often than not, it was someone looking for something in the way of just some encouragement, perhaps a job, maybe some advice on running for office. Somebody just wanted to know the technicalities of it. But at the end of the day, I saw so many different types of regular, ordinary people that I realized what was happening. And Linda was giving this person at this moment love. She gave you her friendship, she gave you her advice, and all mixed in with that was just her love for other people. So I submit to you, point number one, that she set a heck of an example for all of us, and we should never forget. And what a great opportunity to remember today that she was a lover of her fellow man. Let me ask you all a question. Let's just imagine an Augusta full of Linda Beazleys. If we were all Linda Beazley. Let's imagine a world full of Linda Beazley. And you know, it's really the second great commandment. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And she had that one knocked out. She was great. Now, I also think that I should mention in passing a couple of things that are worth mentioning about Linda. She had a sense of humor that sometimes bordered a little bit on the extreme. She would get a good laugh at your expense at almost any time of day or night. Got a couple stories. One, we'll have somebody here that might be able to verify. Miss Willie Kennedy was one of our original employees. And Willie, raise your hand. Everybody give her a hand. She was somebody. If you could get by Willie, you might get to Linda, but it was tough getting by. Anyway, one night Willie and Tina Linda show up at my house about 9 o'clock at night, and they're all kind of acting like frantically. And I said, well, what in the world is wrong, ladies? And they said, oh, we just had a terrible thing to happen to us. We've had somebody, get into the courthouse. We were working late, getting ready for this election coming up, and the guy exposed himself. And we've got to go to court in the morning. We don't have anybody to open the office, and you need to come down and open the office. And I said, well, what am I going to do if I get in that office? And they said, well, you've got to do it because we've got to be there. We're going to teach that fellow a lesson. And I said, well, what y'all, I mean, I know this is a bad thing, but can't one of you say, oh no, we're all going that way. And I said, well, why do we need all of you? Because he referred to us as a bunch of old women, suggesting that showing himself off didn't make any difference. So I said, that's not true. So we're highly offended. So I said, I'm not going to go to the office in the morning. And they said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going down to court and listen to this story. I'm going to get it firsthand. A second story, which I personally really was involved in, early on when we had the Board of Elections, right before one of the first elections, we had a polling booth out at the old Sans Souci, if you can remember where that was, out across from Augusta National on Washington Road. You know, the apartments that were over there, there was a bar over there and all. And they had a community room and a swimming pool, and we were using the community room, I think, as an election place. And so Linda and I, and Willie, I don't know if it was you, had maybe one other person with us. And we didn't have any keys to get in there. We needed to get some equipment inside, and it was kind of late at night. And so we climbed the fence, and in doing so, Linda and I both kind of tore some of our clothing and all, and yelled and hollered, and then we started laughing, which attracted the neighbors, who in turn called the police. And when I saw the police coming, I said, this is not really going to work out here. I said, the chairman of the elections and the director of the elections board out there, half clothes, the clothes. I said, this is not going to be good. So in charge of the police, guns drawn and everything like in the movies, and all of a sudden one of them says, hold on, everybody, hold on. It's just Linda. Let's arrest Pat. Well, there's a whole lot that I could tell you about Linda that I would like to do, but I just want to tell you that I have known a lot of people in my life. And I don't know that anybody outside of my wife made a bigger contribution and impression on me than Linda. Simply because, she went through life like all of us with a lot of heartache, a lot of tough times. She certainly wasn't married into great wealth or anything of that nature, and we'll hear some more about that. But she just was such a real person, such a loving person, such a caring person, that I think all of us who knew her carry a little bit of her in our hearts every day. And I'll leave you with the thought that she was an example of inspiration for all of us. She loved all of us. And let's follow that example. Amen.
Very well said, Pat. Very well said. Some of us, I look around the room and there's some of my colleagues from around the state that are here. I won't call us old timers, but let's just say we've been doing this for a little while. And we sometimes will talk to each other and say when times are tough and tough have to get going, we'll say, well, it's time to get our Linda Beazley on. And that's what we do. Very true. Thank you, Pat. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is a good friend, co-worker of Linda's, co-worker of mine for years, Ms. Kathy Cox. Kathy is presently the president of Young Harris College up in God's country, they say, where things are a little bit cooler, which we can all appreciate on a day like today. Kathy served, though, as Georgia's Secretary of State from 1998 to 2006 and worked side by side and hip to hip with Linda through some interesting times in Georgia. During Kathy's tenure as Secretary of State and as Linda's tenure with the state, we all experienced Florida 2000. And will we ever forget the pictures, the recounts, and the hanging chads and whatnot? And Kathy, being the very smart woman that she is, quickly realized that Georgia needed to do something about its voting system. We, in fact, had punch card here in Richmond County, as did many of the other biggest counties in the state. So she and Linda worked together, researched, and in 2002 implemented the country's first statewide uniform voting system. And I'm proud to say that that system is serving us well today. So we are very honored that Kathy made the trip all the way down here to be with us, and I hope you'll join me in giving her a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Lynn, and thank you, Pat, for the remarks, and thank you, all of you. It's a pleasure to join you today to honor the life and memory of our great friend, Linda Beazley. When Lynn told me about the opportunity to be here today and told me about the room you were putting together and the artifacts, many of which I understand Linda had squirreled away in the office that they found when they were moving offices, and the work she and her staff had done with the Augusta Museum of History to put together these wonderful exhibits about the rich history of elections and all the part that Linda played in this transition, I knew that I had to be here. So many of you are friends to me because Linda introduced me to you, so it is really a pleasure to be here as a part of this celebration. Just as Pat said, we all know what a special person Linda Beazley was. Her service to this county started in 1957 as soon as she graduated from high school, from that basketball team at the Academy of Richmond County. She first went to work for the sheriff's office, and that quickly led to her job in the probate judge's office. And back in those days, as Pat referenced, the probate judge was the election superintendent. So that's how she cut her teeth on election administration. And then, of course, she got that opportunity in 1973 to become the first executive director of the first Board of Elections. But I didn't have the chance to meet Linda until, fast forwarding, until 1996. And then at that point, she was actually winding down her job as county administrator. She had served 20 plus years, I guess, as the executive director of the Board of Elections and 3 years as your county administrator. I had left my seat in the Georgia House of Representatives and joined Lewis Massey as his Assistant Secretary of State in his new administration. And a few months into our tenure in that office, it became very clear to us that we needed a new leader in the elections office. Someone who knew election law, someone who could make decisions and manage the staff, all of the basic requisites of the office, but more than anything, we knew we needed somebody who could help us with the 159 county election staff, people all over the state of Georgia. And as we quietly started asking around, one name kept surfacing. People kept saying, you need to talk to that lady in Augusta, Linda Beazley. Call Linda Beazley. She's the person you need in charge of that office. Even when we talked to the Attorney General's office, and Dennis Dunn is here from the Attorney General's office, he'd say, oh, Linda Beazley, that's somebody you need in that office. So I think that we all started checking her out and found out that sure enough, her decades of work here in Augusta and Richmond County, her leadership of the Georgia Election Officials Association, which is an organization she helped found back in the 1980s, and she served as the first president of that organization for the first 5+ years of its existence, helped her develop a national reputation in elections. She served on the advisory board of the Federal Elections Commission. She testified before Congress about handicapped accessibility at polling places. Her peers had recognized her with the very first Francis Duncan Award for Excellence in Election Administration, which is an award that even today carries great significance in Georgia's election circles. So as Lewis Massey and I talked about it, I think he had me place the first call to Linda, and I seem to remember the call. Linda was very businesslike. She didn't know me. She didn't know why I was calling. I think she thought I was crazy. I remember her saying, you know, I'm retired now. You want me to go to Atlanta and run the state office of elections? I'm kind of retired now. And I think it took me about an hour's worth of begging, and then I think I had to have Lewis Massey do a lot of his sweet talking. And before you know it, Linda was making the weekly commute to Atlanta. She got herself an apartment, and for the next 8 years or so, every week, Linda was doing the drive on I-20 back and forth to Atlanta. Bless her heart. But what an 8-year period it was. We all found out very quickly what a charmer Linda was. For a number of years, there had been a perennial candidate in a variety of statewide races. Those of you who work in elections know kind of what I mean by this. This is one of those folks who always runs, never wins, who has his share of, shall I say, social and or mental health issues. This particular candidate was a fellow named John, who always ended up coming into the Secretary of State's elections office. He may still be there, Secretary Kim, probably the same guy. He always took pride in being as difficult and belligerent as he could be to the staff, trying his best to intimidate everybody around him. He was loud, obnoxious, he generally smelled bad. I mean, he had every problem under the world. He liked to use lawyer talk. He was not anything close to being a lawyer. He just liked to make people think he was. It was pretty clear that his whole goal was just to intimidate people. So the staff had warned Linda about him when the first election cycle rolled around after she took over the office. So he came in to qualify for office, and Linda was ready. He came in with his intimidation guns loaded. And needless to say, by the time he left the elections office that day, he had been placed under the Linda Beazley charm spell. That spell remained over him for the rest of the years that Linda was there. In fact, he started calling Linda Libra Lady. I don't know if he just didn't understand Linda, but he called her Libra Lady. He'd come in and ask for Libra Lady. And he would refer to her every year he'd come in to see her. He liked her so much that one year he even invited her to be his date to the governor's inaugural ball. I'm not sure he had an invitation to the inaugural ball, but he invited Linda, and she charmingly declined. In the same vein, during another qualifying period, a gentleman came into the Secretary of State's election office and announced he wanted to qualify for office. But the noticeable thing about this man is that he was in a hospital gown connected to an IV and had a urinal in the other hand. He had released himself for the hospital so that he would meet the deadline to qualify for office. He was sick, not in good humor, and difficult to say the least. But Linda, politely, as you know how she was, invited him into the office to have a seat. She filled out the qualifying papers for him and then dialed 911 to call an ambulance to get him back to the hospital. He did not win the election, but he made a friend for life with Linda because she treated the man with respect to the extent she could. And it became very clear to us that this was Linda's M.O. She could soothe the savage beast. No matter how wacky somebody might act, she was going to treat them kindly and with respect. In fact, I know that you have your share of your own stories just like that here in Richmond counties. I'm told that just prior to the 1990 general election here, Linda was visited by the self-proclaimed prophet in a Panama hat. Some of you may remember this. I'm told the story here. The prophet was a gray-headed elderly gentleman who was a little bit stooped over, walked with a cane, came into your election office, very anxious and agitated, and commenced to explain to Linda that he had had a vision and the election needed to be called off. So Linda invited him, of course, very politely to sit down and tell her all about this vision. And so in a few minutes, Linda came out of the office and called her staff together and announced that we were calling off the election. And the prophet in the Panama hat was very delighted that the election was going to be called off, and he left the office a satisfied customer. And of course, the election was not called off, but he was never heard from again. He left a happy customer. Having been heard and his dignity intact, just as Linda knew how to do, she showed him kindness and respect, as she always did. Now, I know that Linda's charm could extend to a little bit of naivete, I have to admit. Once in the multi-story office building where the elections office was for the Secretary of State, once a thief got into the building and was going floor to floor, stealing women's purses if they weren't at their desk. And it became a big consternation topic one day. Anybody who wasn't at their desk lost their purse or lost the contents of their purse. And so we were all talking about it, and there was a lot of consternation that day. So later in the afternoon, we had a staff meeting, and Linda came in very excitedly, and she said, "Oh, there's good news. They found out who the thief is. They haven't caught him, but they put up posters in the hall, and they have his picture, and they know his name." And I said, "Well, what's his name?" And she said, "His name is Bolo." Bolo. We said, "Linda, that means be on the lookout." She thought his name was Bolo. She was real disappointed by it. I said, "Linda, you used to work in the sheriff's office. Don't you know what Bolo means?" She sometimes could be a little naive. Linda was at the helm of our state elections office, as Lynn made reference, when the infamous 2000 presidential election came around. That was the election that cast a laser focus on all elections in our country and the manner in which those elections were conducted. And of course, while the media concentrated its focus on the state of Florida and the notorious Chads, as Lynn mentioned, were being hand-counted with microscopes, our elections undertook a very intense study of what happened in Georgia and found very disturbing results. In fact, we found that we had lost 96,000 votes in Georgia. 96,000 votes due to the hodgepodge of antiquated voting equipment that we had in our state, including the punch cards that you had here in Richmond County and Fulton County, some of our bigger counties, and including a lot of the newer equipment that just didn't register votes for one reason or another. The media didn't really care about what was happening in Georgia because the margin between Bush and Gore was larger than 96,000 votes, so it wasn't going to change the outcome of our electoral college votes. But we were horrified to know how inaccurate our own elections were. So it caused us to move rapidly down the path of overhauling our entire election system in Georgia. And Linda Beazley was right there in the middle of that entire transition. Now, when you think about the change we went through after that election and the legislation that we had to get passed through the Georgia General Assembly, and the fact that our bill made Georgia the first state in the nation to require all counties to use the same election equipment, our bill passed the Georgia House of Representatives with only 2 dissenting votes. Now, that would never happen today on any kind of legislation. I don't care what Secretary of Kemp introduced today or any other member of the legislature tried to get passed. You can't pass anything in the Georgia legislature today with only 2 dissenting votes, right? But we got it passed with only 2 dissenting votes, and I have to give a lot of thanks to the charm of Linda Beazley, the charm and integrity of Linda Beazley. She was our secret weapon. We could send her into those legislative meetings, and when I say she could soothe the savage beast, I mean it literally. She could take Democrats or Republicans, and she could charm the pants off of them. Now, I don't mean that literally, but she could have them eating out of her hand by the end of a meeting. She was so well respected that by the time she answered all of their questions about our elections legislation Everyone understood it, everyone believed what she had to say, and nearly everyone supported it. The legislators loved her because they trusted her. She didn't have a partisan bone in her body. She had perhaps the highest degree of integrity of anyone I've ever seen work the legislature. And it sure paid dividends for us in passing elections legislation and in making the transition to electronic voting. The House of Representatives honored her with a House Resolution 101 in 2005, making note of her, and I quote, remarkable patience and diplomacy, her keen sense of vision, and her unimpeachable reputation for integrity, intelligence, fairness, and kindness. Linda decided to officially retire from the Secretary of State's office in 2005, but she couldn't retire from elections. The late Representative Henry Howard, as chair of your local legislative delegation, immediately asked her to take a seat on the Board of Elections and serve as its chairman. She, of course, accepted coming home and coming full circle in the elections process, and she served until her health just wouldn't let her work anymore in 2011. What a life. What an enormous contribution to the administration of elections for 48 years. And what a gift of gracious service to the people of Augusta and Richmond County and the state of Georgia for all 71 years of her life. In gathering some notes and stories for today, Lynn Bailey wrote these words, which I think so fittingly describe Linda, as we all know and loved her, and I quote Lynn. Maybe it was playing basketball in high school, maybe it was her early start in public service, but somewhere along the line, Linda developed a great sense of fairness and justice, or right from wrong. She also knew that a gentle word went further than a harsh one. She was able to reach the unreasonable. She was never one to make a person feel foolish, no matter how outlandish the individual's behavior. She had a quick wit and sense of humor, end quote. It is so fitting that a community room like this is being named for Linda. She was all about community and the people around her. By placing her name on this room, there's no doubt that good things are going to happen in this room. Advanced voting is going to happen here, and Linda Beazley helped us pass the law that allows advanced voting to happen in Georgia. Community gatherings will happen here, and I believe that Linda's spirit, her twinkling eyes, and her bright smile will be looking down on all who assemble here, just like today, and her innate ability to bring people together will fill this room with infinite possibilities. Good things are bound to happen here because of Linda Beazley's goodwill. She would not have it any other way. And we always did what Linda wanted us to do. I'm glad you chose to honor her incredible contributions this way, and I'm really delighted to share in special memories of my dear friend. Thank you very much.
Truer words have never been spoken. It's great. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll continue on with the program. This time I'd like to call forward Mayor Hardy Davis on behalf of the city. Mayor Davis is a lifelong resident of Georgia and a proud graduate of Georgia Tech Institution. Go Jackets. Before being elected as mayor of Augusta, Mayor Davis served, I know, I heard the grunts. Before being elected as mayor of Augusta, Mayor Davis served both as state representative and a state senator in the state of Georgia. He was sworn in as mayor of Augusta in 2015. If you'll help me welcome Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. It gives me great pleasure on this afternoon to have heard such tremendous words about Ms. Beazley and the contributions that she's made to the great state of Georgia and certainly to our community here in Augusta, Georgia. And it gives me esteem, honor, and pleasure on today to present this proclamation. I'd like to ask her son Wayne if he'd step forward been so much said already, and I certainly won't prolong our time in reading this, but on behalf of the City of Augusta, our commission, and all of those employees who make up this fine city, we do hereby proclaim June the 8th as Linda Beazley Day in Augusta, Georgia. And thank you.
Wonderful segue. Wayne, don't go anywhere. So Linda had 4 children, and her son Wayne is here today to talk on behalf of the family. So I'd like to introduce the very distinguished and ever charming Wayne.
Man, oh man, y'all know how to put pressure on somebody. All I can say is my mama was tough, you know. It's evident in all the support that's being shown right here, from all walks of life. And she had an open ear. She listened to anybody. And she was hard-working, dedicated, loyal. She was just fun to be around. I mean, that's the God's honest truth. And, she loved the horseback ride. She could play basketball, but with the best of them. She really loved her grandbabies. And she loved Miss Kennedy. She loved a lot of people. And every day I happen to work for the city, and every day I run across people that tell me little stories about my mom. And I could sit up here for a week, but we wouldn't even cover one day for her. I summed it up. She was tough as a lighter knot, and that's all I can say. We're truly honored for y'all to show her this recognition today. Words can't even say what we feel. On behalf of the Beazley family, we want to say thank you to Liam, especially you and your staff for putting this together, to the mayor, Mr. Rice, Mr. Kemp, Ms. Cox, and to keep me from getting all teary-eyed on y'all, I'm going to let it go with that.
About the twinkle in Linda's eye. Well, I'm here to testify that sometime that twinkle would turn to a spark. She had a very fiery personality, but as Kathy alluded to, she generally got what she wanted because she knew what was right. And she had that great ability to persuade others to, well, come around to her point of view, which was usually the right thing to do. As we move forward with closing remarks, I'd like to ask Secretary Kemp to come up. We are so pleased that Secretary Kemp has driven in from Athens to be with us today. He's been Secretary of the State of Georgia since January of 2010. Prior to becoming Secretary of State, Brian served as a state senator from 2002 to 2006. Among other duties, his office, of course, is charged with the conducting secure, accessible, and fair elections. And like his predecessor, Kathy Cox, Brian is very responsive to the needs of local election administrators. He understands that we have a value and that the part we play is important, which certainly makes the job that we do easier to do. Brian has his own accolades and accomplishments, of course, being in office. One of his primary accomplishments, I think, is the successful implementation of the new statewide voter registration system, and that system is fully operational now, and it's an updated system that enhanced the overall efficiency of the voter registration process. It's a good system and provides a layer of security that perhaps was lacking in the past. So at this point, it's my pleasure to ask Secretary Kemp to come forward. Thank you.
So much. It's great being in Augusta, and what a great occasion. I'm still trying to get over the announcement that they were going to cancel the election. In today's world, you know, if you did that, it would be up on Twitter like 30 seconds later that the Secretary of State had canceled the election. I could only imagine. But I tell you, when you deal in elections, you get to deal with just anything that you can imagine, and the tribute President Cox gave to Linda was certainly, and those stories by the others too, really gives you a feel for what the local elections folks go through every day, and certainly during an election. And I have learned that well in my role, and certainly appreciate the relationship that we have with these individuals. And I was reading Linda's bio, and it says on there that she had helped administer 13 presidential elections. And as a former statewide elected official, Secretary of State, you can appreciate anybody that can administer good elections, because that means good job security for the Secretary of State. So we certainly appreciate that. And a presidential year is unlike others. You know, people are really excited about it. It's no different this year with an open seat for the presidency, and hopefully Georgia's going to be positioned where everybody has a role, Republican or Democrat, on deciding who those nominees are going to be. In the past, we've always had a role in the November election, but sometimes you kind of wondered about the primary and us being able to weigh in, and hopefully positioning us this year with some other southeastern states on March 1st, we're going to have a real impact. And I think that's what Linda would have wanted. She wanted a fair process. She wanted a process where everybody participates. And that's really what elections are all about. And it helps have great communities, have great state, and have a great country when you can go through a process and you know that that process has been fair. And that's what Linda did her whole career. And I tell elections people all the time, and I've seen this in my role coming from a small business owner to being in the legislature, being Secretary of State, now having to deal with elections. You know, this elections thing, it kind of gets in your blood. You know, you never can get rid of it. And we saw that with Linda. She came home to serve on the elections board after all that she had done. She could have just said, no, I don't need to do that. That's not what I want to do. But that's what you do when you believe in fair elections, and you believe in a process, and you care about your community. And that says a lot about her as a person. So I'm honored to be able to be here today to help honor that. This room is going to be awesome. I've been to a lot of elections offices all over the state, and this is a fine room that you'll see for advanced voting anywhere in the state. And I think that's a testament also to the leadership of this community in government, but certainly to help honor Linda Beazley's name. So thank you for having me. It's a great occasion.
Thank you, Secretary Kemp. With that, I think we'll close up. Let's see. A few people I want to thank. Here we go. I'd first of all like to thank especially the past and current mayor of the city of Augusta and members of the Augusta-Richmond County Commission, both past and present, for dedicating this space in honor of such a great Augustan. I'd also like to especially thank my good friend Donna Williams for planting the seed that this community room should bear the name of Linda Beazley. Fabulous idea. I'd like to thank the past and present city administrators for helping us and supporting us really in the design of this room so that it is multifunctional and does serve, as Secretary said, as a fine place for voters to come in to vote, but also as a general all-purpose community room. Back in 2014, the first year, last fall, we used this room for the first time in November for voting, and we had nearly 6,000 people come through to vote in that several-week period of advanced voting at nothing but rave reviews. It was so easy, the access was so easy, and that was all by design. We didn't want people to have to go through security to get in to vote. We wanted it to be like election day. You go to the polls to vote with no hassle and as much ease as possible. I would also like to give a very special thanks to the Augusta Museum of History Director Nancy Glazer and her construction manager Larry Graham for designing these magnificent displays that you see around the room. Before you leave here today, I hope that you'll use your program as a guide to help you, particularly in the display cases in the back, to help you appreciate what it is you're looking at. There's some wonderful election memorabilia back there, going back to the mid-1800s. And the reason that we have that stuff today is because Linda squirreled those things away. She knew they were important and we should keep them. And, you know, if she said it was important, then I don't dare throw it away. And I'm so glad we did it. I'd also like to recognize Mike Blanchard with Information Technology Department for calling me up one day and reminding me or letting me know that I was not the only person in this building who thought those doors were cool. These are the original doors that were on our office on the first floor here. Linda had them painted in 1976 to celebrate the bicentennial. So we took them down and we stored them and protected them, and with the museum's help figured out a great way to display them and preserve that little bit of history. Funny story, those doors were actually painted by a prisoner who was in prison for forgery. He was a great artist. I'd like to thank the Augusta Chronicle for loaning us their wonderful photograph collection, and all the family and friends that are here today, especially those who traveled to be here. And last and most importantly, thank you to Linda Beazley for her leadership, her friendship, unwavering support, and for leaving behind her legacy that made today a reality. It's been a great day, has it not? It's been a great day.